Good afternoon. Well, the industry's willingness to absorb change, to embrace change, has been very, very impressive. Now, before diving into how the technological revolutions and the digital opportunities are going to affect the shipping industry itself, let's step back for a minute and look at what's happening across other industries. What do we mean when we talk about digitization, the fourth industrial revolution, and so forth? And I'm going to very, very quickly give you that panoramic outsider's view, if you will, before we dive in. Let's start by discussing what is this fourth industrial revolution, these waves of technological change that are accelerating. We all know about the first industrial revolution, and we're seeing that in just the last 30 or 40 years, we've already moved beyond just digital alone to applying the digital domain, digital revolutions, to all aspects of our life, right? To our biology, to our social systems, even to our governments, and most certainly to all of our economic practices. And that acceleration is part and parcel of this idea of the fourth industrial revolution. No sector, of course, is going to be immune to it. I'm going to show you very shortly so many examples of how companies are able to use technologies to cross over into sectors where in our minds we tell ourselves, wait, they don't even belong here, and yet they're already conquering them. And that's what's happening. You see the breakthrough technologies that are most significant. It's not just them individually. It's not just sensors and the Internet of Things. It's not just the robotics and the 3D printing. It's not just the nanomaterials and biotech. It's what happens when all of them wind up occurring in combination with each other. And so as you see those revolutions unfold, you have to give thought to how it might apply to you. Start to think like a disruptor. So let me give you some examples of the disruptors. And the exercise that the smartest businesses go through is to put themselves in the shoes of what they would do to disrupt themselves, right? How do you launch an insurrection against your own company? Think it through like this, and then you may know exactly what companies you need to be partnering with next and buying next to be part of your own value chain and ecosystem. So take a few examples of companies that have managed to exploit the unbundling of products and service providers. You may be familiar with Craigslist, a company that has taken the traditional field of print media and advertising, moved it into the small sort of micro-scale digital domain, and really captured the market. iTunes, no further explanation required. WhatsApp and a number of the OTT services that have emerged that are leveraging the existing digital infrastructure and platforms to then capture, even cannibalize the market share of those incumbents from the telecom sector. And now even in education. I mean, what has been more bricks and mortar for thousands of years than that? And all of a sudden, by taking advantage of the online environment, the mass captive audience of internet users, a lot of service providers like Udacity, edX, Coursera are being able to provide these services with none of the traditional overhead at a fraction of the cost at precisely the time when issues like student debt and so forth have become so significant. Now, how do we use the digital layer, the digital platform, to expand our own market reach? Now we're seeing individuals, such as musical artists, circumvent record labels and go straight to the market, expanding their reach in the process. Amazon might be the most significant company now to discuss in quite a few of these areas, actually. Amazon has become so large it's hard to categorize anymore as it moves into adjacent markets so rapidly. Many people think that Amazon is going to become the world's first trillion-dollar company, and it very well might. We didn't think early on when Amazon was simply taking one retail sector after another and simply selling the goods through an e-commerce platform that it would so rapidly challenge the bricks and mortar retail industry. Now with Amazon Web Services, their role as a data storage and host has become very, very significant and one of their largest sources of revenue. And of course now they've moved into the transportation space itself with Amazon Prime, with drones, and all of the other things that are going on. So everyone is already embracing these technologies like drones. We saw some demonstrations of that this morning, and we may see even more today. So again, that thinking about how to disrupt yourself is going to be absolutely critical, or who is going to disrupt you. Google started as a search engine, now as a collection of businesses under the conglomerate name Alphabet. One of them, Sidewalk Labs, is already winning contracts to do urban planning and design in American cities. Facebook is now applying for a banking license in order to take its mobile wallets and currencies and to allow for this full ecosystem with, again, 2 billion users to disrupt financial institutions and enable its own financial transactions. Google moving into hardware again with handsets. Tesla, of course, is now buying into the home energy and utilities space, and so on and so on. And these are all examples that are very useful. Now, bringing it ever so slightly closer to shipping, we talked a bit this morning about the Internet of Things, how important it is for the industry to capitalize on the computers that it has, to use more than 20% of the computing capacity, so to speak, of the hardware and the software, and to actually digitize your supply chain, just to have a better understanding of all of the ways in which you can gain in efficiency by way of better data monitoring and tracking amidst the entire ecosystem of suppliers and sub-suppliers. And shipping is very much one of those sectors that absolutely has to think about that ecosystem approach. It applies in automotive, it applies in retail, but absolutely in shipping. The efficiencies you could gain, the cost savings you can incur by way of knowing in a real-time way with the kinds of dashboards that we have available now, such as Elementum and so forth, to be able to monitor your full supply chain. That is absolutely essential, and one of the first things every company in the shipping space has to do is to start to upgrade their data monitoring around the actual physical location of all of their assets, goods, movement of goods, and vendors, and so forth. It's also very useful for geopolitical, environmental, and other kinds of risk analysis. So as we move into this Internet of Everything, as some people are calling it, the question becomes, how do you harness and better analyze this data? Again, one of the most important topics. Already we feel that we are drowning in data, so to speak. But the next question becomes, how do you harness it? How do you optimize it? And again, some of the companies that we've already heard from today are really at the cutting edge of helping the shipping industry in particular and the trade ecosystem, the trade facilitation ecosystem in general, to actually capture this data, harness this data, analyze this data, figure out not only how to do better in your own performance, how to save costs, but how to capture markets that are being underserved. The analysis of data can really help you do all of that, and that's why it's critical to think about the technology sector not just as a disruptor, as I mentioned in the first half of the presentation, but as a partner for all of you. Now, we're witnessing a lot of companies that are starting to make this leap, to make this transformation, to be able to partner with the technology sector and to become simultaneously digital as well as physical, if you will. In the entertainment sector, we see this now in the proliferation of a global online part-time workplace of people, of talent. We heard earlier this morning from Hyperloop the ways in which they are crowdsourcing hundreds of people working on developing one of the most sophisticated hardware systems and transportation systems that the world has ever seen. Most of them have never, ever met each other. Right? It is completely crowd-based, even crowd-funded, and that's just one of many examples today of how you too can think about expanding into new markets, acquiring new companies, partnering with the digital sector, and think less about the bricks and mortar element of it, but use digital as a platform. And it's another good way to think about how you're going to listen to your customers, how you're going to get feedback from your customers, and use digital tools to do that and to start to augment your business models. Now, final point is just about global companies. In a way, this should be nothing new. In all of the research I've done and writing I've done on the history of globalization, to a large extent it comes back to two industries, shipping and insurance. And I don't just mean since the Industrial Revolution or since European colonialism, I mean for thousands of years, actually, since ancient Greece, shipping and insurance have been critical drivers of globalization. So now let's think about, so you represent some of the original globalizers, the original drivers of what global companies are today. But how do you take that model, digitize it, and remain global, remain competitive. And the companies in the world that are the most successful today, the most global companies, manage three things. They manage scale, affordability, and adaptation to markets. Those are three absolutely critical things. So you can see it happening with very large companies in retail, in logistics. They're able to scale. They really have a global presence while managing the costs of that. They make their products affordable. We see this with, for example, Unilever is a very good example of a company that has scale but manages to keep the price point affordable. We're seeing now even some very sophisticated, high technology hardware companies like GE figure out ways to reduce the costs of their goods and services for the local markets. And the third element of it has to, of course, be the adaptation. What are the consumer preferences? What are the business practices? What are the corporate cultures around the world? And how are you going to adapt to them? So scale, affordability, adaptation are the three elements of truly global companies. And they achieve it very much through focusing on how to integrate digital processes into what they do. So I hope that, that throughout, in the spirit of everything that's already been said, that you think of technological disruption not just as a threat to you, but as an opportunity. The more you absorb it, the more you're going to be more competitive in your industry, and the more you're going to see opportunities to expand beyond it. Thank you so much, and I wish you a wonderful afternoon.